was born and raised in Vietnam, South Vietnam, and my family immigrated to Portland, Beaverton, Oregon in 2000 and actually in 1996.
Yeah, so I'm half Panamanian, half Italian. My dad was born in Panama, and he moved to the states when he was pretty young. He moved when he was 2, but I still have a lot of family in Panama, so definitely connected with that.
I know my mom raised us to be around a diverse group of friends because our family, we have Hispanic, we have Japanese in our family, we have white in our family. So our family's background, we used to call it the Benetton family, with all the different cultures. Um, so I guess that brought, to get along with everybody that I ran into, came across in the military.
And I do remember growing up in seemingly not particularly diverse situations at school. The odd thing for me also, to add another layer, is being mixed race. Some might call me a Hapa. I'm only half Japanese from my father's side. And as a result, it was strange growing up in Portland, because the kids that were Asian were totally Asian. Everyone knew that they were. And everyone kind of put me in this strange side category. I wasn't Asian enough to be part of the Asian kid group, and I wasn't white enough to be one of the white kids. So I just kind of, it was easy to be discounted because people didn't, know what to make of me.
Growing up in the Bay Area is an extremely diverse population. Every shape, size, color, orientation, you've got everything there. And growing up with that, I never saw anyone as different. I always tried to treat everyone the same.
So growing up in Indianapolis in the 70s and 80s, I was, luckily there was desegregation happening in the public schools. So desegregation or busing, as a lot of folks call it. So I was pretty lucky. I got to go to some very diverse schools.
So when I grew up in LA, I was quite young, and I spent most of my time between there and Guatemala. And I feel like I really grew up in Centralia, Washington, because that's where I came into adulthood. So when I think of my home community, I think of Centralia, and it's a predominantly Caucasian environment with not a lot of diversity. So there were some challenges there growing up just as a part of a biracial household, and I was darker when I was younger than I am now, but my dad is certainly somebody who is 100% Guatemalan and is visibly so to the community there.
So for me, where I grew up was very diverse, especially in retrospect. Looking back now, I realize how diverse it was compared to other parts of the country.
Even here at work, as an adult, there's one time I actually had a customer I was working with tell me that I was ambiguously brown, and because he couldn't figure out what to make of me, and so it's interesting because I look at that as we continue to move on with our level of diversity within the city, within our world, and how many mixed race individuals we're dealing with, and how race has become even less well defined as it used to be. And so, for me, growing up that way, it's been an interesting experience to know that I'm not, it's hard for people to categorize me and they don't know what to make of it.
I don't know, it's the way we were raised to love everybody and to treat everybody the same. So we had this big group of friends that hung out and just grew up together, and some of us still talk.
Well, basic training was the first time that I went east of the Rockies that I could recall.
Yeah, sure. You had all sorts of different folks, basic training that you got to meet, right? And that goes on through your Army career.
And in the military, it's a lot like that because there are no quotas, and it's just those that have joined, and you're on a team. And if you don't like that people, too bad. You need to figure out how to work together to accomplish the mission.
Actually, it was pretty diverse. My first duty station was in Point Loma, California. It was a floating dry dock, and it was actually really diverse. I look back on it.
I think that by the time I joined the Army, because I'd already been through undergraduate and graduate school, I was, I guess, surprised at the amount of diversity when I got to training, but I'm not sure why that diversity didn't transfer over into some of the units that I've been in. And maybe they're because they focus more on a higher ranking group of individuals, and maybe we don't have that diversity within the higher ranks. And because a lot more of it was present when I was going through my basic course or the initial officer training.
So when I enlisted for the Army, went to the MEP station, and then went to basic training, I wasn't really shocked by the diversity of the group. I wasn't really uncomfortable around any. There weren't any folks there that I hadn't, types of folks that I hadn't encountered before, right? So all different races, so it didn't surprise me as much. What did surprise me is that there were folks there who hadn't really seen an Asian person before, or hadn't really seen a black person before. That was really odd to me. And I was really impressed by how some of these guys really handled it all. Because it must be very strange to show up in a place and be surrounded by people that types of people you've never seen before.
I had a first class petty officer told me when he joined the Navy, when he went to boot camp, was the first time he ever saw a black person in his whole life, which I thought was crazy.
I got to see people from all over the country. It was kind of a new experience, not seeing just West Coasters, and actually feeling strange that there weren't very many West Coasters actually at Basic. There was a lot of people from the East Coast and from the Midwest that were there, dealing with all sorts of accents and everything else. It was just strange seeing all these people coming together.
It's always been a diverse team. There's never been a team that I've been on that was strictly one type of person. Everything I've done in my life up till now has always been a team of very diverse, opinionated people that work together and bring their backgrounds and their experiences towards solving whatever mission or whatever problem we had at the time.
My second unit, I think, is more like family oriented. It's more, diversity, a lot of different from backgrounds, and a lot more respect each other.
You had the folks who were pretty well off, who were kind of like, yeah, the judge told me I had to join the Army or go to jail or whatever it was. That's a horrible thing to say. I can't have that in the video.
And also, prior to completing Basic, we didn't have a common experience that we could all latch on. So we all had, we came together and didn't know what to make of each other a lot of the ways. It was very diverse in my experience at Basic. It did actually seem to be heavily weighted by minorities in my basic training class. So yeah, it was pretty diverse.
There was always, and it wasn't just one big group, one minority that was more than others. It was always a mixed crew. Yeah.
There are definite challenges being a minority in the military.
My first unit was that I transferred to is 21 Bravo, which is combat engineer, and it's more like a specific, MOS that train, and it's like infantry with C4 or explosive, but they think themselves more like a gang ho and go out and do their work, which is great. But I think I wasn't being part of it, or I wasn't being close to the unit as I was with my second unit that I transferred to, which is more diverse.
I started to form these ideas of education really being the foundation, and just how we continue to exclude communities of color. Kind of was formed a lot of that for myself when I was a Marine, and it was really disappointing to see.
I don't really have a lot of experiences because my work as a judge advocate, although I may have only been ranked as a lieutenant captain or major, I've often worked with people who are lieutenant colonels, colonels, and generals, and there just hasn't been that diversity at that level within that rank structure within the military that I've experienced personally. I think that's part of the reason why the military hasn't done that is because it can sometimes become an old boys club and become an in or out crowd. And I certainly felt that. I think that on some level, because of my lighter skin, I've been able to pass or be considered an educated Latino, and so maybe somebody on the inside.
And I think also just as a woman, when you're in the Marine Corps, you're definitely in the minority and you feel that you're in the minority.
Some of the challenges I faced were probably just competing with the other people in my career field, the males, and trying to prove that I had a right to be there and could do the same job as well, in some cases even better than they could, and just that I deserved that rank and the respect that goes with it.
During most of my service, it was don't ask, don't tell. So I wasn't open about my personal sexual preference and that part of my life. And so for the first about 6-7 years of my military career, I was on the inside on that old boys club, and I saw my career progress quite strong. But as soon as people found out that I was gay, there was a change overnight. There were people who would invite me over to their house who no longer spoke to me. People who did things behind my back and would not include me on emails or informational meetings or set me up in a position not to succeed. I also saw my assignments changed, assignments to lower level positions, things that were not going to get me promoted, things that were not good for my career, whereas I had quite the opposite experience for that first 6-7 years. And these were all the same individuals I'd worked with during that whole time. So that last year with the Oregon National Guard was quite difficult, and I think so because they weren't able to embrace diversity or the value of people who didn't fit the norm.
There weren't a lot of differences for me between men and women, and so going to the Marine Corps and being around a lot of people who were very traditional and their wives stayed at home and raised the kids, and that was where women were expected to be, was pretty difficult. I felt that no matter what I did as a Marine, at the end of the day, a lot of people just felt like it didn't matter because I was still a woman. And it's hard for me to think back on those memories a lot without really feeling that I didn't fit in or wasn't really valued or was mistreated a lot because I was a woman. So for me, although the Marine Corps is a really diverse place, it wasn't, I guess you could say, inclusive, or everyone wasn't really valued.
I was always, I think, more thick-skinned than a lot of people, so what people thought of me really didn't bug me. It was always an internal challenge for me to do the best I could or make certain goals. I was always very headstrong in those kind of things. But as I came up through the ranks, I could tell that there were more women that showed that potential, but were maybe a little more timid, weren't as thick-skinned, and being in the military itself is fairly hard for a female. I mean, you go through more things than the average civilian female does. But joining a career field, even if not by choice, if you were assigned into that career field, that's mostly male and is a little more rugged, you have to learn to have some of that thick skin. And I had a couple young airmen that I had to bring in and talk to and try and mentor them to not take stuff personally and try not to get too emotional about things and learn to accept the criticism and accept the feedback and use that to build yourself up and push forward and prove to everyone else that you had a right to be there and that you could do the job just as well as anyone else.
You know, I went to City Council last year on Veterans Day to testify. And my question was, what do you think of when you think of a veteran? Who do you picture? Now, earlier in the week, we had a gathering, a veteran gathering and celebration in the City Hall atrium. And I just looked at all the veterans we had who work at the city. And there was just such a wide variety, just a really good-looking group of people that were so diverse from all different genders, all different races, ethnicities, cultures, and it was really something that wasn't surprising to me, but I think it was surprising to other folks who, when they picture a veteran, they picture a very specific type of person. And I think one of the things I really loved about serving in the Army was meeting so many different people from so many different backgrounds.
I think that with diversity becomes greater attention to details, more ideas, thinking outside the box. And so having lots of voices and people at the table who are being heard just allows us all to move forward in a quicker, more efficient manner, maybe something we didn't necessarily think of.
That everyone brings their own perspective. Not everyone grew up in the same environment or believes the same things, but when you get a group of diverse people in a room and start working towards solving a problem, they might come up with some answer that you never even thought of. And that's one of the great things about having a very diverse team or group, is that it helps you problem solve in different ways and brings different ideas and concepts to the table that you might not have ever thought about.
Different people bring different, like setup background or different skills or problem solvers to the table.
I mean, the value that I saw most of all from the diversity was just different perspectives, different ways of problem solving, different ways of finding the solution and working together.
I found that quite frequently in my career, and I don't know if it's because I'm gay, Latino, or because I'm a veteran, just constantly when I'm giving opinions, they're often different than those around me. And I'm not sure why that is, but I think that's one of the benefits of having a diverse group of people around. And I've found that certainly with other soldiers that I've served with.
That's one of the values that I definitely saw in the Marine Corps, is that you have to interact with people who don't agree with you and don't believe the same things that you do. And even still, a lot of people with different political opinions in my life are from when I was a Marine. So I think that's a really important that we've kind of lost in the last few years in the country.
Another contribute to bring to the workforce is having that background to help each other, and if someone couldn't find the answer, then be a resource and helpfulness.
Everyone started throwing these ideas, and I started telling people, okay, you're in charge of clearing the buildings, and you're in charge of getting the buses to put everyone on to get them to the center, and you go arrange where they're going to be held so we can start asking questions. And everyone had ideas and started throwing those out, and then I started tasking them, well, that's a great idea, you're now in charge of that, go make that happen. And the diversity, I think, helps that, because they came up with those ideas based on their own experiences.
You had to get along with everyone, and you had to find a way to work together.
Working together, right? It sounds kind of corny, but really taking all these people from all these different walks of life, all these different cultures, even different languages, and putting them together and saying, you have to rely on each other to stay alive. You have to rely on each other to accomplish a specific goal. That's a pretty good trick to get all those folks to really work together. Now, are there issues around getting along and respect and that kind of stuff? Sure, of course. But, at the end of the day, people always knew who were they, that they were going to protect each other and be there for each other.
I think one of the great things about the Army is being able to be exposed to people from many different parts of the country, all different income levels, different experience levels, education-wise, and other.
An aspect of Reserve and Guard soldiers is the fact that they have to maintain a civilian job. They work a 40-hour job like any one of us, and then they do this stuff in the Army as extra. It's something on the side. They're there because they want to be there. They're compelled to serve. But they also bring with them another skill set. You might have an infantryman who is an IT guy on his civilian job, and when the network goes down out in the field and you're looking for help, that might be your guy. He may be a machine gunner, and guess what? You're pulling him off the line to go work in headquarters as an IT guy. We've got people that are police officers, doctors, lawyers that are enlisted because they want to be there, and they're doing things that are completely unrelated to their civilian job a lot of the time. So they're bringing a whole second skill set with them, as well as a passion because they want to be there. So I happen to work with a guy in my unit right now he's a trial lawyer, and in the Army he's a cook, and he loves it. He loves every minute of it because he wants to be there.
You see a lot more women taking up those roles in the military. You see them in more combat-related roles, and for the Air Force, security forces is considered one of the combat-related fields. So I think it has gotten easier. We still have a long ways to go. I mean, the male to female ratio is still fairly low, but it's improving. And I think females are just as capable. They might not have the same body strength to do pull-ups and all the other requirements of some of the elite fields, but they're more than capable in their thought processes and other things to fill those roles.
I had somebody that I worked for, he's the executive officer, that's kind of like number 2, and he said to me, a general had come in, and they said that she was like the first female general or the first female African American general to ever do X, Y, and Z. And he was very frustrated about it, and he was in the hallway saying how terrible it was and how he's so sick of this diversity stuff. And I took him into my office and I said, how many black lance corporals do you see, which is like the lowest rank? And you know, I think when I was in, it was 60 or 70% were communities of color and only 30% were white. But then you get to the highest rank, which was sergeant major, and I was like, name me one black sergeant major that you know. And you know, he'd been in the Marine Corps 15 years and he couldn't name one. So I basically said to him, so don't say that in front of my Marines ever again, you know. So it's definitely, you know, it's diverse, but is it an organization that finds a way to bring everybody up with them? I don't think so.
The first unit I joined was with the National Guard in the Oregon National Guard, the Judge Advocate Office. And during my 8 years there, for about the first 7, we didn't have a woman judge advocate. And you could tell the difference in the office during that time and the difference after we had a woman judge advocate. There was just a difference in the office for the better. I think that the military, in some aspects, it really depends on what unit you're in and what training you're going through, but people don't necessarily see that diversity at all times, like in my unit where we didn't have a woman judge advocate. I think that was a shortcoming of our office and one we needed to focus on more.
I think really the amazing thing about the military, at least what I experienced, was just this group of diverse people, for the most part, really working together to accomplish a goal. You never have to ask or wonder if if your fellow soldiers had your back, and that's a pretty amazing thing to pull off when you have all these different folks together, all from all different walks of life, from different socioeconomic levels, from different races, different genders, all working together to accomplish something. It's a pretty amazing thing.
Yeah, I agree. Being like raised and having different background as Asian is, family is like teaching disciplines from a young age. It's just not to ask so much question. There's once order given, and just you gotta do it and try to seek a way to get the task done. And sometimes it's challenging, but it's find a way to resolve it and be patient about it and be helpful.
If you weren't able to work together, it wasn't getting done. You know what I mean? You'd end up failing the tasks. General quarters, we had drills all the time. So I don't know. Everybody got along and pretty much worked together and to build that. To build a relationship with each other. Because pretty much when you're out to sea, especially the smaller ship, I was on the USS Paul F. Foster, and that was one of the small boys. I think our crew was, I want to say 100 people. And so when you go out to see those, the only people that you see we go on a 6-month cruise, and those are the only people you see until you pull into a port. So, I mean, getting along and not having that tension.
Yeah, and that's an aspect of being a leader in the military that I, came to know, is that you don't really get to pick your team. You get who you get, and you got to make it work somehow. You don't have to like everybody, but you all have a common mission, and you're trying to work towards it. And so the people that are under your leadership, again, like I said, you don't get to pick your team necessarily, but you have to really focus on identifying what their strengths are and put them to work in such a way that you maximize those strengths and mitigate their weaknesses.
They become family.